皆さん、こんばんしょー。ロケットアイドル Vtuber の宇推くりあです。もうそろそろクルー10のメンバーが帰ってくるということで、今からクルー10を眺めようと思います。ということで、リアと一緒に着水を見守りませんか？では行きますよ。10、9、8、7、6、5、4、3、2、1、0。いきます。リフトオフじゃなくて、スプラッシュダウン。シュッ。はい。ということで皆さん、こんばんしょ。ロケットアイドルの宇推くりあです。あともう少しで着水なんですが、ちょっと待って、今これ完全にライブに戻しめてみますが、あとね、25分ほどで着水になるということです。この後ね、10分前ぐらいかな。着水10分前くらいに、もしかしたら光る感じで流れ星になったような大西宇宙飛行士。大西宇宙飛行士が流れ星にならちょっとやばいか。クルードラゴンが、大西宇宙飛行士の乗ったクルードラゴンが今朝分離しまして ISS から。その後、着水10分前くらいには、大西宇宙飛行士を乗ったクルードラゴンが流れ星のようにキラキラ光りながら飛んでくるのが見えると思います。多分。はい。で、ちょっと待って、巻き戻してもいい？ちょっと一瞬さ、待って。この黒いさ、周りをさ、確認していい？ここ15200から15270。15200から15。ブラックアウトがありますって言ってましたね、今ね。プラズマの火に包まれるから通信できない時間があるんですけど、その時間ですね、何時か何時まで繋がりませんっていうアナウンスがあったみたい。日本から見えるんですか？コメントありがとう。日本からは見えないです。着水するのがね、カリフォルニア沖かな？多分。よし、ちょっと一瞬巻き戻してもいいですか？巻き戻すよー。確かね、これ、ついさっきね、ノーズコーンが閉まる様子が配信されていたんですよ。
And again, you're seeing great live view
はい、
of
こ
the
んな
nose
感
cone
じ。
closing. That camera on the nose cone actually showing it
ノーズコーンが
in
クルー
progress.
ドラゴンのカプセルの上側にね、パカッと開くような感じでついてるんだけど、それがちょうど閉まっていく様子がね、配信されました。こんばんしょん、ありがとう。今日の夜晴れるかな？そうだね。まあ天気悪かったらもうこの段階まで行かないと思うので、今は大丈夫っていう手でやってると思いますね。はい。まあ、こんな感じで閉まるところが配信されました。あとは、そうだな、なんかあったかな。クルー10のかっこいいね、これ。ドラゴンクルー10の X ね、10だからね。すっごいかっこいいロゴもあり、こんな感じで、中の様子とかも来てましたね、さっき。地球を回って降りていくための軌道とかが出てるのがよく見えますね。はい。今回は大西宇宙飛行士がね、ずっと宇宙から ISS でね、いろいろトロピカル飲料とか飲みながら楽しくしてたからもう半年経っちゃいましたね。早いですね、時の流れは本当に。 はい。ドラゴンモニタリング、コマンダー、フライトエンジニア。キムさんも一緒に帰ってきますね、今回。大西さんも。
Cosmonauts, and after departing the International Space Station of the Expedition 73.
で、この間のメンバーが到着して、ゆいさんも来てね、大西さんとゆいさんここにいるっていう感じで、ペアルックになってて可愛いよね、ほんと。もう。
Was the rhodium plant life experiment, and this investigation studies how radiation and gravity environments at different orbital altitudes.
今の位置が書かれているんだけど、ここまで移動していくと思います。このアメリカの大陸の横までね。
Studies have shown microgravity affects growth rates and a better understanding of the mechanisms
今の宇宙船タッチパネルですね。そうなんだよね。割とすごいよ。
As mentioned earlier, NASA astronauts Anne McClain and Nicole Ayers also
その考え方も結構大事でね。パネルってタッチパネルって何でも映せるけどさ、確実に押せるかどうかっていうのもあるんだよね。だから確実に押せる物理ボタンをこう選択したいボタンだってある。
The IROSAs were first demonstrated aboard the orbiting laboratory in June 2017, and 8 have been installed to augment the power available for scientific research and other activities. During their mission,
あとね、
15
15分ぐらい、19分でも言ってますけど、15分ぐらいで降りてくるかなと思ったんだけど。まあ待ってよ。今日エレキバンクみんなありがとうね。すごく楽しかったよ。
The microalgae could provide sustainable meat and dairy alternatives during long-duration space missions. It also could be used to make biofuels and bioactive compounds and medicines in space and on Earth.
説明とか。今ね、バイオの説明してるね。
The International Space Station, of course, orbits more than 250 miles above Earth, giving astronauts a unique view.
Dragon. Tablets are secured, restraints are tightened, visors are down, crew is ready for entry.
お、なんか言ってる。
SpaceX copies. Crew are configured for entry. We are 5 minutes until predicted.
Go for entry って言ってる。
See you on the other side at 1527 Zulu.
1527
Dragon copies. See you there.
And there we did just hear some additional communications between the core here and SpaceX Mission Control and Hawthorne and the Crew 10 astronauts aboard the Dragon Endurance spacecraft, confirming that their visors are down on their re-entry suits and they're preparing for the re-entry and splashdown activities to come. We are expecting that communications blackout in less than 5 minutes from now as we target that splashdown in just about 18 minutes from now, 8:33 a.m. Pacific, 11:33 a.m. Eastern off the coast of San Diego, California. So again, a little bit about the science that the crew had been conducting during their 5 months aboard the orbiting laboratory. As the International Space Station orbits more than 250 miles above Earth, it gives astronauts a unique view of their home planet, where they can photograph familiar places and interesting phenomena. While passing over a stormy night, NASA astronaut Nicole Ayers captured images of simultaneous lightning bursts at the top of two thunderstorms. Scientists used instruments installed on the space station to study lightning and other weather conditions in Earth's upper atmosphere. This research helps protect communication systems and aircraft while improving atmospheric models and weather predictions. And you can see a view of that photo there just on your screen. It's quite beautiful. And we're about 4 minutes away from that communications blackout. Another one of the experiments that the crew contributed to was the
さっきのやつ見てるとドラゴンのノーズこう綴られましたとか書いてますね。はい、あと11時58分頃ですね、ドラゴンのデュオビットバーンが軌道離脱燃焼が終わって、そしてトランクが切り離されましたっていう記述もありますね。
The Apex 12 investigation could clarify the role of telomeres in aging and diseases and help scientists equip plants and other organisms for the stress of long duration space flight. And to round it all out, one of the other experiments they conducted was using a fluorescent microscope known as ELVIS, which captures the motion of microscopic algae and bacteria in 3D, a new capability aboard the International Space Station. The technology could be helpful in various applications in space and on Earth, such as monitoring water quality and detecting potentially infectious organisms. And so we are now about 3 minutes away from that communications blackout. And during that, we'll also have confirmation that entry begins. It typically happens about 2 minutes after the initial loss of signal with the spacecraft. Will begin that entry process.
Yeah, the communications blackout is expected at 8:20 and through 8:27. So some other cool photography while on station. Dragon docked to the International Space Station, soars 259 miles above
何これめっちゃ綺麗。
Cambodia in this long-duration photograph revealing star trails, lightning storms, and the city lights of
すごい。
Southeast Asia streaking below. And I love these
ISS から撮ったや
incredible
つかな。
views that they get, and they get to take these photos
ドラ
that
ゴン
we
が
get
ド
to
ラコエ
see,
ンジンを
even though
吹
we
いてい
don't
ま
get
す。
to be up there in space
ほら、
with them.
いっぱいパパ
Just
パっ
an
て吹いてる。
incredible view.
And we are now about 2 minutes away from that communications blackout, a little less than 2 minutes. And then after that, the entry will begin. We did hear that the nitrox and suit purge is underway, and they are beginning all of those entry preps. So again, we will stand by as we continue to hear from the team and as we enter this communications blackout in just a few moments.
Yeah, and the suits are there. They're an extension of the spacecraft. They help keep the crew cool, but they also have features just in case there's a depressurization inside of the cabin to help keep the crew safe and healthy during re-entry. It's unlikely to happen, but we have those suits just in case. And the suits are flame resistant. They have 3D printed helmets which are attached. Basically, the IVA intravehicular suits are used for just inside of the spacecraft, so not like the EVA suits that we were showing
あともうちょっとでね、多分ね、
and again, they help flow
光って帰ってくると思うんだ
nitrox
けど
through
ね。
the suit, help keep the crew cool, as well as providing them oxygen through these dynamic events as they're coming back down to Earth.
And during Crew 11's launch, we actually noticed Mike Fink has a new IVA suit, so he's debuting a new one. You can't really see too much of the details unless you look real close, but it'll be rolling out real soon.
Yeah, there was a lot of lessons learned from the Polaris Dawn mission with the SpaceX EVA suits that we've translated to the IVA suits. So Mike Fink is the first one to wear the upgraded one, but then Crew 12 is actually expected to wear all of the new designed suits. That's pretty exciting.
It will be exciting, and we are just moments away from that communications blackout.
今ね、ブラックアウトしてるんだって。
is underway.
もうちょっとかかるって、ブラックアウト
we are
が。
expecting that communications blackout to begin here, and it'll last approximately 7 minutes due to
7分前に
plasma
始まったんだ
formation
って、ブラ
around
ッ
the
クアウトが。
spacecraft. And during this blackout, no vehicle telemetry is received by Mission Control, which you're seeing a live view of Mission Control on your screen, or by the recovery team, which is staged out off the coast of San Diego, California. And no external commanding of the vehicle or voice communication is possible.
カリフォル
And
ニア
as a
沖に降りる
reminder,
って。
Dragon is designed to fly itself, so during re-entry, the vehicle will be slowing down
こ
from
の間アク
orbital
ションミッション
velocity,
が
which
終わっ
is
たばっかりだ
approximately
から、
17,500
久しぶり
miles
って
per
感
hour.
じしないな、
Top
帰ってくる
temperature
の。な
Dragon
ん
will
か。
experience upon re-entry
帰ってくるの、この間見たばっかりって感じがする。
It's really hot. The blackout period is expected to last about 7 minutes. Again, it has begun at 8:20 a.m. this morning. Again, expected to be complete at 8:27 a.m. And we're not going to hear any comms right now because we know that we have a loss of signal at this moment. But at the expected 8:27 a.m. time frame, we'll start to hear some comms from the core to the crew, checking in to see if they have acquired the acquisition of signal again.
And during that 7-minute comms blackout is also when the entry phase begins. So that is expected to begin about a minute from now at 8:22 a.m. Pacific, 11:22 a.m. Eastern time. And so things will be really ramping up. Again, during re-entry, the vehicle will be slowing down from its orbital velocity, which is approximately 17,500 miles per hour. And the top temperature that Dragon will experience during that re-entry is about 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah, and we do have windows on Dragon, so the crew, at least the
もうちょっとかかるけど、でももうそろそろ見えると思うんだよな。
that plasma buildup, which we've heard
is a great view
of all the different colors that the plasma creates as it's coming back through the Earth's atmosphere.
And so on the bottom left-hand side of your screen, you can actually see some of the vehicle data. So then once we have the signal reacquired, that will update a little bit. But before that reentry, they were at an altitude of about 82.5 kilometers. So continuing to come back down again as the International Space Station itself. So when it was docked, it was at about 260 statute miles above Earth's atmosphere.
And
less than 11 minutes until splashdown of the Crew 10 crew. And again, they're currently in a blackout period, so we're not going to have any visuals. We're not going to have any comms for a few more minutes. We're about 2 minutes into the blackout period, about 5 minutes left.
And during or right after that splashdown, a lot of things will happen in rapid succession. So it takes about 45 minutes from splashdown until the boat is fully onto the recovery boat, the Shannon, which is staged out in San Diego, California. And then after it is hoisted up onto the boat, the hatch will be opened and we will welcome Crew 10 back aboard the boat, and they will begin those medical checkouts and evaluations before they are flown back to shore off the coast of California, and then from there they will be prepared to fly back to Houston and begin their full recovery and be greeted by friends and family. And so we're now a little over 3 minutes into the communications blackout, about 4 minutes to go. The vehicle should be experiencing that entry phase right about now.
もし今のうちに時間がある人はグッドボタンを押してってもらってもいいかい？いや、すごく頑張って今日眠い中やってるのでその分ください。ください。よろしくお願いします。ブラックアウトってなんで起きるんですか？ありがとう。電磁した空気がその辺を漂ってるポイントがあって、そこを通過するときにプラズマ化っていうんだけどさ。それ耐えなきゃいけないんだよね。
And the really cool part about the Dragon spacecraft is we're actually utilizing the Earth's atmosphere, that re-entry, to help slow the velocity of the vehicle significantly from 17,500 miles per hour down to about 350 miles per hour is when the drogue parachutes will deploy. And then after the parachutes are deployed, by the time that the vehicle splashes down onto the water, it's about 16 miles per hour. So really, really slow compared to how fast they've been moving for the last 5 months.
And then once they splash down, it's pretty quick. Those initial 2 fast boats will get out there within moments, a minute or 2 after splashdown, and they will conduct those initial safety checks. So they will screen for hypergol and make sure everything is okay for the recovery teams to approach. Some of the teams will also then get onto the spacecraft and begin safing it and prepare it to lift up onto the boat, and other teams will be working on the parachutes and gathering those up. Again, we are about 2 minutes away from the expected acquisition of signal. That initial loss of signal took place about 5 minutes ago during that re-entry phase as a result of all the plasma buildup. Again, it's completely expected, and it happens during every re-entry of a spacecraft from its journey in space. Again, Crew 10 is returning after an about 5-month science and research mission aboard the International Space Station. They initially launched aboard a Falcon 9 rocket off the out at Kennedy Space Center in Florida on March 14th, and then docked shortly after that to the International Space Station. They spent 5 months doing all of that science and research, and then they undocked yesterday at 3:15 p.m. Pacific, 6:15 p.m. Eastern Time to set them up for today's re-entry and splashdown. And we are expecting that acquisition of signal to take place about 90 seconds from now. So a little bit more than a minute to go. So we hear those call-ups from the core to the crew to check back in with them, and less than 7 minutes to go until we have splashdown.
Yeah, it's getting very exciting here. I'm sure the crew is very excited to make it back home to planet Earth.
And there on your screen on the bottom left, you can actually see the telemetry catching back up.
You see them getting very close to the coast of California.
Dragon, SpaceX, comm check.
SpaceX Dragon, we have you loud and clear.
お、聞こえたぞ今。
I have you the same
来た
Dragon,
来た来た。
expect automated chute deployment.
テレビ来た。そして声も聞こえましたね。声聞こえた？声聞こえ。
Dragon copies.
ドラゴンコピーって言ってる。 これもしかして。
And so we did just hear that call up from the core, the crew operations resource engineer here in SpaceX Mission Control to the crew 10 astronauts currently aboard Dragon. Confirmation that we have reacquired signal with the Dragon spacecraft, and you can see that the speed is rapidly slowing down as it begins its final phase, and we will have confirmation of those parachutes deploy in just a few moments.
Yeah, you can also see the altitude in the bottom left-hand corner.
見られるかな。
See it getting closer
どんな感じかな、海の方は。
back down to Earth.
GPS converge. Expect nominal altitude for drogue chute deployment.
さっきのお兄さんあったかな。なんかね、コマンダーがやってんのかなって感じはしたけど。まだかな、まだかな。そろそろ配信が始まってもおかしくないんだけどな、向こうの。
And we are expecting those drogue parachutes to deploy a little bit after 8:29 a.m. Pacific, 11:29 a.m. Eastern.
And the crew there on your screen rotating in their seats in preparation for that splashdown. During that re-entry, they are leaning more on their backs, but when they are coming in for splashdown, they can sit a little bit more upright in preparation for that touchdown.
And on your screen from left to right is Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov, NASA astronaut Nicole Ayers.
Brace for drogue window.
NASA astronaut Anne McClain and JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi. Again, they are getting prepared for that drogue deploy, which should be happening in just a few moments from now. Again, we expect that a little bit after 8:29 a.m. Pacific, 11:29 a.m. Eastern, and it will be shortly thereafter by the main parachutes deploying.
リアミュートで喋ってた。ごめんごめん。来た来た来た来た来た。来たぞ来たぞ来たぞ。さっき中をね、様子映してましたね。宇宙飛行士さん。そして席が回ってたの見えました。来ました来た来た来た来た来た来た。ピカーン。よく映ってるわい。横で見えへん。横でよく見えへん。横で見えへん。あ、見えた。おー、赤外線カメラですかね。お、ドローグシュート開きました。
Visual and two healthy drogues.
ちょっといつも見てるタイミングよりも遅いタイミングから配信が始まったかな。2つのドローグが開いて、その後ね、パラシュートが開きます。
Spacecraft has now slowed down to less than 200 kilometers per hour, and it is now just over 2 kilometers above the water.
ドローグシュートってやつです。ドローグシュート。この後メインパラシュートが開きますよ。今日こんな風に昼だからよく見えるね。来た。こっちがパラシュート。はい。パラシュート4つが開くかな？無事に。ふわーっと。
Main chute descent rate nominal.
はい、メインシュートの。
And we do have confirmation and a visual view.
来ましたね。めっちゃ綺麗。写真撮っとこう。
We copy 1,000 meters.
クラゲが4匹いますね。さっきのちっちゃなドローグシュートから引き寄せられる感じでビュッと出てきましたね。
And about 900 meters away from the water surface.
Dragon, 800 meters. Dragon, 800 meters.
800 meters.
800 meters. 800メートル、800メートルって言ってる。聞こえる聞こえる。高さを言ってます。
Daytime views that we get, we don't always get to pick the time when the crew splashes down, but it's awesome when we have a great morning and a clear view watching as the Dragon Endurance spacecraft carrying
あと600メートルかな。
Basic Dragon, 600 meters. Basic Dragon, 600 meters.
600 meters って言ってますね。
I copy 600 meters.
はい、600ですよ、600ですよって言ってる。
and just over a minute away from that targeted splashdown time, again expected around 8:33 a.m. Pacific, 11:33 a.m. Eastern. Now about 500 meters away from the surface of the water. And slowed down to about 35 kilometers per hour. Again, it'll
あと
continue
もう
to
ちょ
slow
っとで
down.
あ、雲に吸い込まれていったのかなこれ。
SpaceX copies 400 meters and crew are braced for splashdown.
And we just
Wow.
saw an incredible view there of the
全然見えな
Dragon
くなっ
as
ちゃっ
it
た。
re-entered
逆雲
under
壺だ。
some cloud cover.
逆雲壺。
And we should be regaining some of those live views from the recovery zone momentarily as it gets resituated to capture the return. The spacecraft is now about 200
どこ行っ
meters
た
above
着
the
陸は
ocean.
着陸。
And it
あ
has
ともう
slowed
少
down
しで
to
もう
about
着陸すると思うんだ
30 kilometers
け
per
ど、
hour.
着
Again,
水
it will continue to slow down
あ、これ
until
ド
about
ローグシュー
16
トの方や、
kilometers
これ
per
多分。
hour.
外れたドローグがふわふわと浮いている様子かな。
And there we can see another live look of the Dragon Endurance spacecraft carrying Crew 10 back home to Earth following their 5-month mission, moments away from splashdown.
まだかなこれドローグシュートの方を映してるよね、多分。何これさっき外したドローグってやつですね。ドラゴンを映してほしいけど、ドローグが映ってるのもまあ、それはそれで貴重かな。
SpaceX Dragon, splashdown. SpaceX Dragon, happy splashdown.
スプラッシュダウンしたっぽい。スプラッシュダウンしたっぽいです。曇ってて見えないのかな。
Splashdown.
着水成功したっぽいですけど、
And we did just hear
ドロー
that confirmation
グが映ってる。
splashdown. The view that you're seeing on your screen is a little bit delayed, which is why we don't have that visual confirmation yet, but we do have that verbal confirmation between the crew and the core that they have successfully splashed down, and Dragon Endurance has now returned home.
映っとるやん
There
け
is that live look
ね、何映
of
してたん
Dragon
だ。
Endurance as it sits on top of the ocean off the coast of San Diego, California.
Dragon, SpaceX, we see the onboard for Power 1 28-volt converter. No crew action required at this time. Stand by for more words.
Dragon copies, no crew action on the caution. Dragon copies, no crew action on the caution.
二重に聞こえるね。
Dragon Endurance has now returned home, and
お
NASA
帰りなさい。
astronauts Anne McClain, Nicole Ayers, JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi,
テクヤ大
SpaceX
西。
Dragon for step 1.2, Dragon for step 1.2, 800, we see 4 fired.
and
Dragon, we see the same.
可視光だと見えないのかな今日。なんでだろう。明るいんだよね、で
and
も。
Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov are back on Earth after an approximately 17.5-hour return
これも
journey
IR カ
from
メラなん
space,
じゃないかな。
completing
赤
their
外線カメラ
5-month
じゃ
mission
ないか
aboard
な。
the International Space Station.
The SpaceX recovery ship and team has been waiting for Dragon splashdown, and they will now start to make their way to the splashdown location. The teams have been ready and waiting about 3 nautical miles away, so it's going to take them about 30 minutes to make their way to Anne, Nicole, Takuya, and Kirill inside of Dragon.
まだかし
And
ら、
so
まだ
we
かし
did
ら。
have splashdown happen on time at 8:33 a.m. Pacific, 11:33 a.m. Eastern off the
着
coast
水
of
したので、この
San
後ね、
Diego,
お兄さんが出てくる
California.
ところまで見よう
So
かな
we
と思います。
are
多分1時間ぐらいか
eagerly
かり
awaiting
ま
that
す。
recovery. There are a few steps that take
けど、
place before the crew
大西さんが出
can
てくるところ
exit the
見る
spacecraft.
ときに、
First,
だんだん
those
こう、
fast boats will
こ
go
っち向
out
きに
to the
や
recovery
ってくれてるのか
location
な。呼ぶみたいな。
to
ことが
conduct some initial safety checks,
見
test
れる
for
ので、楽しみに
hypergol,
聞い
and
てください。
ensure that everything is safe and ready for the recovery teams to approach and then proceed
うわ
through、
だいぶ
those,
遠いな。あと、なんか、
following steps
曇ってる
to get the capsule back onto the recovery boat, the Shannon. And so the Shannon will make its way out to the specific recovery location. It takes about 30 minutes for it to get out there. So by the time the safety and hypergol checks
Dragon 3.1 are upright, stable 1.
We copy stable 1.
すごい
On
天
behalf
候
of
だ。
SpaceX, welcome home. System safety
ずっと天気悪いって言って
verifications
た
are in
もんね。
progress. I will report back when recovery personnel are en route.
でも無事に帰ってきてるっぽくてよかったから。
SpaceX entire crew 10. Thank you.
すごい荒れてる海。これ宇宙で酔う前にというか後に海で酔っちゃうよこんなの。ほらドローグショット映すわ。わかんないわこんなの。
And so you did just hear some congratulatory words between the SpaceX team here in Mission Control and Hawthorne,
失礼します。
as well as NASA astronaut Anne McClain, who is the commander of Crew 10, so exchanging those celebratory words as they are now successfully and safely back on planet Earth following their mission aboard the International Space Station. And for those of you who are just joining us, this mission has gone smoothly so far, and Dragon successfully splashed down off the coast of San Diego, California at 8:33 a.m. Pacific, 11:33 a.m. Eastern, just about 5 minutes ago.
Approximately 17.5 hours prior to splashdown, Dragon autonomously undocked from the International Space Station, completed a series of departure burns, jettisoned its trunk section, and performed its final burn, the deorbit burn, to place itself on a trajectory towards San Diego, California. Dragon successfully re-entered the Earth atmosphere, followed by deployment of its parachutes to slow the spacecraft down to a gentle splashdown. And we'll now follow the final part of Anne, Nicole, Takuya, and Kirill's journey as Dragon is lifted out of the water and placed onto the recovery boat.
And upon detection of landing, Dragon does automatically release the main parachutes to prevent wind from pulling the spacecraft. And then Dragon automatically safes any pyrotechnics still present on the vehicle and may automatically perform additional minor system reconfigurations. The astronauts do remain seated and in their suits at this point, but the onboard air conditioning keeps things temperate inside the spacecraft, and the communication systems on board remain powered so the crew can continue to communicate.
Now, SpaceX has 2 fast boats in the recovery fleet, which have moved quickly to the splashdown point, and you can see one of them there on your screen next to the Dragon Endurance spacecraft. They are being followed by one of the main recovery vessels, which will move into position upon upwind of the spacecraft. The 2 fast boats have very specific roles. The first approach is focused on immediate safety inspection of the spacecraft integrity and checking for any presence of hypergolic propellant vapors, ensuring that it's safe for the recovery vessel to approach Dragon. Now, once Dragon is cleared for full approach, the team begins rigging the spacecraft for water recovery by the recovery ship. The second fast boat is responsible for parachute recovery and also serves as a redundant boat to the first. And we'll see a team member on a jet ski soon helping to gather up the detached parachutes.
And it does take about 10 minutes for the recovery crew to complete their safety checks. And then once complete, the team will begin preparing Dragon to be lifted onto the recovery vessel, the Shannon, today. As part of the preparation for this lift, one member of the recovery team will climb on top of the spacecraft so they can attach Dragon's hoist rings and connect the lifting lines. It will take less than an hour to raise Dragon to the recovery boat and remove the crew from the spacecraft. After those initial medical checkouts, the crew will return to land within 4 hours by helicopter, and if no additional medical assistance is needed, the crew will then board a waiting NASA plane and depart for Houston and make their way home. And so just about 7 minutes ago, Dragon Endurance did return home, and NASA astronauts Anne McClain, Nicole Ayers, along with JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishin and Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov, are back on Earth after an approximately 17.5-hour journey from space.
SpaceX recovery ship and team has been waiting for Dragon splashdown, and they're now currently making their way to the splashdown location. The teams have been ready and waiting.
Dragon, SpaceX, we are go for recovery personnel to approach the capsule. Expect fast boats alongside in about 1 minute.
Copy 1 minute. Copy. You guys are on it. Thanks. You guys are on it. Thanks.
And so we did just hear confirmation that the recovery boats, or the fast boats, have been given the confirmation to proceed. So those recovery steps will soon commence. Again, it takes about 10 minutes for all those safety checks to be completed. And we actually have a team member out on the recovery boat who we will be hearing from momentarily to get her perspective. And so joining us from the recovery vessel is NASA Public Affairs Officer Reagan Scharfetter, who had a first-hand view of the crew returning and splashing down. Reagan, can you hear us? And how was the view from the recovery vessel?
Hey there, Anna and Jesse. How do you hear me?
We hear you loud and clear.
Awesome. Well, seeing splashdown firsthand was a moment I assume others on board will play back for the rest of time. We were stationed within 1.5 nautical miles from the splashdown zone off the coast of San Diego and had fairly decent visuals from the Shannon recovery vessel. The cloud ceiling is actually higher than originally forecasted at around 1,100 feet, which gave us a little more room to see the Dragon spacecraft coming in on this misty morning. Even with these cloudy skies, though, we were able to witness the 4 white and orange main parachutes before Endurance descended down into the Pacific Ocean. And now we're just eagerly awaiting our Crew 10 members to join us on the ship very soon.
That's very exciting, Reagan. I'm so happy that you have that firsthand perspective. You mentioned the cloud cover a little bit, but overall, how have the landing conditions been from your perspective?
The landing conditions were nominal this morning and within limits in regard to sea state, winds, and cloud ceiling. There was also some excitement earlier on board when we spotted not only whales, but also a lot of dolphins and a shark out on our starboard side. Currently it's about 66 degrees out with 5 miles per hour winds and what has been described as a pretty mild sea for the ship.
ボートに
Could be more of a rougher
引っ
ride
掛
for
け
the
て
capsule itself.
帰ってくる。
Irregardless, after spending 146 days aboard the International Space Station,
プラ
I
スチッ
think
クも
the
したの
crew
か
is
な
going to be more than thrilled with this fun reintroduction to the planet.
We're going to have to keep our eyes peeled for some whales over here, I guess. But can you tell us a little bit about the recovery journey to get to this point?
お天気悪いね。結構大きな波が来てない？
One standout part of this recovery is that Crew 10 actually marked the first crewed
Dragon,
NASA mission.
SpaceX, Hypergulf Space
よく今日帰ってきたね。
checks are nominal. Rigging is in progress. Approximately 5 minutes until capsule lift. We have flight surgeons standing by. Please confirm crew are ready for PMC.
Copy, 5 minutes. Copy, 5 minutes to lift. Cruise.
We did just hear some communication there, about 25 minutes to
Copy,
lift.
Dragon. The next call you hear will be from flight surgeon on Dragon to ground private.
Dragon copies.
And you can see that view there of the 2 fast boats and that rigging underway.
うわ、
Reagan,
す
do
ご
we
い。
still have you? Do you want to continue
手
on
前の何っ
about
て
the
これ多分
recovery
船から
journey
撮っ
to
てるん
get
だ
to
け
this
ど
point?
船
Yes,
が
absolutely.
横にいるのか
As I was
な
saying, one
なんだ
standout
ろう
part of this recovery is that Crew 10 marks the first crewed NASA mission to return to the Pacific Ocean since
おー、消えちゃった。
1975. That's 50 years ago when the Apollo Soyuz mission ended. The landing zone shift from the Gulf and Atlantic sites shows the commercial crew program's continued flexibility and adaptations to mission needs, but this doesn't go without paying attention to new perspective challenges like marine layer and visibility issues, as well as some rougher sea states, which we are getting a slight taste of today. These are also conditions the Artemis II recovery team will be tracking ahead of their mission next year, which too will conclude with a splashdown off the Pacific coast. For today's operations, though, we started the morning by flying a series of helicopters out to the vessel. The recovery director and crew support teams were on the first flight out to help get the ship ready. And about 2 hours before splashdown, 2 fast boats and a jet ski were then placed into the water. I was on the second helicopter out here and landed on the ship
Dragon,
about 90.
SpaceX, comm check.
SpaceX Dragon, we have you loud.
こんな感じやろ。
Copy, Dragon. I have you loud and clear with a slight echo. For your awareness, we're going to step into transitioning the forward link now. Comm will be unavailable for approximately 5 minutes.
Dragon copies. Dragon copies.
And we did just hear those comm checks, and we have heard that the crew has reported that they're feeling well following their splashdown. Reagan, go ahead and tell us about your helicopter ride out to the
この後
recovery
チェッ
zone.
クね、機
Yes,
体が大
as
丈夫
I
か
was
どうか
saying,
見
I
た
was on
後、
the second helicopter out here and landed on the ship about 90 minutes before splash. And I just have to say, I have never seen an execution quite like this before. Teams have been working nonstop across various disciplines all week in lockstep with each other, just making sure that every detail was in place for Crew 10's successful return.
That's incredible, Reagan. So what's next for retrieving the crew?
Up next, Endurance will be hoisted onto the vessel and pulled toward the egress platform on Dragon Nest at the aft end of the ship. Safety checks will then be performed before opening the side hatch to ensure there are no hypergolic vapors present. And once confirmed, NASA and SpaceX medical personnel will assist the crew out of the capsule one by one. Once the crew exits the capsule, they'll undergo medical evaluations in the med bay, and soon after that, they'll board the first helicopter out, head to the airport, and then take a NASA plane back to Houston to begin their post-flight activities. I will say, as a first-timer out here,
この後ね、ここに引き乗せるんですよね。上に乗せて、そっから、ぐっとここに押し出して、ここに連れて帰ってくる感じです。
In Korea. In the meantime, though, we'll keep you updated every step of the way out here. And with that, I will send it back to you guys out in Hawthorne.
Thank you so much, Reagan. It's incredible to hear your point of view and your perspective from the recovery ship, the Shannon, an invaluable point of view to have.
リカバリーシップはシャノンさんですね。シャノンとミーガンといるんだけど、シャノンの方らしいです。
Where Dragon will be hoisted up onto, and you can see a little bit of a live view there on the edge of your screen. So that is where Dragon will lift up onto once it's ready. And then once it's safely there, we'll actually move inward a little bit. And then from there, the hatches will be opened and the crew will be extracted out. During the extraction of the crew, they are typically assisted, and that's completely normal. And that's completely normal during these operations. Again, they have been in the microgravity environment for about 5 months. And so some reconditioning needs to take place to reacclimate themselves to Earth's gravity.
みんな酔ってないが心配だわ、これは。
And this is a view from the recovery vessel, but we did see the recovery teams
だって奥に映ってるさ、この揺れすごいもん。で、バーンってなって。シャロンですか？うん、シャノン。シャノンかミーガンのどっちかなんだけど、この子はシャノンらしいですね。
Dragon, we have you the same without an echo.
Sounds like they are trying to.
Copy. Echo but readable.
Trying to update the comms link.
今の写真何？
We did hear an echo from the Crew 10 crew as they were talking to the core. But now it sounds like we may have reversed the echo, where we're not hearing it any longer, but the crew is now hearing the core on an echo. So I'm sure they're going to continue to troubleshoot that to get some clear comms during these last few moments of recovery. Currently, Crew 10 is still inside of Dragon, still in the ocean. Waiting to be lifted onto the recovery ship. The recovery team is rigging up the spacecraft in preparation for that lift, basically adding the straps necessary to lift Dragon out of the water, which will be lifted with the hydraulic lift on the recovery ship. And then into that nest that we were seeing earlier, then they'll translate to that deck that we saw on the recovery vessel. And then finally, the hatch will open. We'll take their first breath of fresh air in a little under 5 months.
And so you are seeing a live look inside the SpaceX Mission Control here in Hawthorne. As soon as we have good views of the recovery again, we will of course share those with you. Sometimes the cameras and the equipment out there just has to be restationed to get some better views during these recovery operations. So again, the crew did splash down aboard the Dragon Endurance spacecraft at 8:33 a.m. Pacific, 11:33 a.m. Eastern, a little under 20 minutes ago. And so it does take about 30 minutes until the recovery ship fully arrives out there, and that's also around the time that that rigging of the Dragon capsule will be complete. So a little bit after 9 a.m. we should see that rigging fully completed, the recovery vessel right up next to Dragon and being prepared for that hoist. And you can see that live look there of the recovery ship, the Shannon, which has made its way out to the splashdown zone. And you can see Dragon Endurance spacecraft, which currently has the Crew 10 astronauts seated inside as they get closer and closer to each other to prepare for that lift onto the recovery ship.
お、結構来てる。
And again, this splashdown took place off the coast of San Diego, California today. It was the first West Coast splashdown recovery of a NASA crew. And the last crewed recovery for a SpaceX mission was actually mission 4 just last month.
しがみついたりします？そんなことある？人間しがみついてる？
And again, we are in the Pacific
この人がね、降りるのがとても見るのが好きですね。
But the last
ダン
NASA crew,
なんかジャンプしてピョンって降りる
9
や
splashed
つ。
down off the coast of Florida. They had some dolphins to greet them. It sounds like from Reagan's point of view, they saw some whales, some dolphins, even a shark out there. So we got a lot of sea members waiting for this crew to come back home.
Giving them a warm greeting back to Earth with the animals that are only here.
Dragon, SpaceX, rigging complete. Approximately 5 minutes until capsule lift.
SpaceX Dragon came in broken and it did not catch the second half. Understand rigging is complete.
やっぱ結構波高い感じだね。イルカもクジラもいたの？すごい、イルカクジラウォッチングもできる。
And for those of you who are just joining us, the Crew 10 members comprise of NASA astronauts Anne McClain and Nicole Ayers, alongside JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi and Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov, safely splashed down off the coast of San Diego, California, about 20 minutes ago at 8:33 a.m. Pacific, 11:33 a.m. Eastern Time. And right now you are seeing a live look from the recovery boat, the Shannon, which is preparing to hoist Dragon up onto the Dragon nest, which you are seeing there on the screen. And then from there, they will continue preparation to open the hatch and welcome the Crew 10 crew back onto Earth as they take their first breath of fresh air after 5 months aboard the International Space Station as part of Expedition 73.
We did hear a call that lift is under 5 minutes away, and you could see the recovery teams as they're rigging up the spacecraft, getting ready to hoist it up. And you could see a recovery team member standing on the outside of the Dragon spacecraft, helping to prepare the vehicle for that lift.
And as part of the preparation for the lift, one of those recovery team members, likely the one we're seeing on the spacecraft right now, will climb to the top of the spacecraft so that they can attach Dragon's hoist rings and connect the lifting lines.
酔ったってみんな酔った？大丈夫？
So recovering a spacecraft is a very complex operation. And so there's a lot of teams involved, and of course, since it is splashing down in the ocean, they do issue some notices to mariners to make sure that the area is clear, and we work closely with the United States Coast Guard to ensure the safety of not only the recovery team and the crew, but as well as other people that may be out in the Pacific Ocean today.
Yeah, we've made sure that this area is clear for these final operations, as it does take some time after splashdown to prepare the spacecraft, safe the spacecraft, prepare the spacecraft for lifting to the vehicle, making sure that the recovery teams are safe. Once they lift the spacecraft onto the deck or into that, what we call the Dragon's nest on the recovery ship, they'll also continue to do some safety checks to make sure that the thrusters on the Dragon spacecraft don't have any more gases leaking from them, and then they'll cover those up. Again, continuing to prioritize safety first as we get the Crew 10
安全第一だって。
crew ready to exit or egress the Dragon spacecraft.
And so that whole recovery process from splashdown to getting the crew out of the capsule takes less than an hour. So we should expect to see the crew and their smiling faces in hopefully about 30 minutes or less from now. Again, they splashed down a little less than 30 minutes ago at 8:33 a.m. Pacific, 11:33 a.m. Eastern off the coast of San Diego, California. This followed a 17.5-hour phasing journey following their departure and undocking from the International Space Station yesterday, August 8th at 3:15 p.m. Pacific, 6:15
この人がね、ジャンプして海に降りるのを見たいんだけど。天気悪いからやるかな、わかんないけどね。お、上に登った、上に登った。忍者上に登った。忍者すごい。忍者上に乗った。忍者。
And again, that recovery member is up there as part of the preparation for the lifting of the spacecraft onto the recovery vessel. They are there so that they can physically attach.
Brace for capsule.
Still think that's one of the best jobs.
見たかったんだ。
Copy. Cruise brace.
So they have physically attached those
これが見たかったんだよ。毎度楽しみなんだよ。
preparing to lift the Dragon Endurance spacecraft onto the Shannon recovery boat
上行ってから飛ぶんだね。
That live look of the recovery member as he jumped off of the spacecraft and into the Pacific Ocean and is now back on one of the fast boats. And those fast boats were some of the initial recovery ships or recovery vehicles out at the splashdown location.
And again, we heard those comms to the crew, notifying them to prepare for the lift. Again, they can't see very much outside of the spacecraft, so knowing what operations are happening helps them understand what those moves that they're feeling are, so they know what to expect.
てるよ。何か起こるか連絡しようねって言ってる。
And once they begin that lift, it takes less than 10 minutes or so for it to be completed. And so it'll be safely inside that basket there at the end of the ship, or the dragon's egg, or dragon's nest is what it's known as. And then about 10 minutes or so from then, it'll be ready for hatch open. And you can see that lift is now underway as the Dragon Endurance spacecraft makes its way onto the recovery ship, the Shannon, that is staged off the coast of San Diego, California, following splashdown of the Dragon Endurance and the Crew 10 astronauts currently aboard.
宇宙飛行士がこの中にいるんだね。乗るか乗るか乗るか、そーっとそーっと。置くか。
And as this is happening, the crew is still strapped in to their seats with the 5-point harnesses, and they'll remain strapped in through the translation of the spacecraft to the deck, and until the medical officer actually greets them. Then they will begin to unbuckle themselves and start egressing the spacecraft.
置いたかな。
And so Dragon will remain in the nest during the crew extraction and then for the journey back to port. So that lift of the Dragon Endurance spacecraft just happened.
Stand by for translation to egress platform.
Dragon copies.
乗りましたね。
And so that lift of the Dragon Endurance spacecraft is now complete. You can see it there on your screen safely in the nest on the recovery ship. And so that translation to bring it forward and closer into the ship to then prepare to open the hatches will begin momentarily. You can see some of the crew member or the recovery members there doing their final inspections and safety checks of the
今ね、棒を持っ
spacecraft
て
before
ね、
they
点検を
begin
して
that
ます。
translation.
横にある、ドラコエンジンってあるじゃん。その棒を突っ込んでるんだ
And
け
then
ど、
once
点
that
検をしてます。安
translation
全
of
な、
the spacecraft is
安
complete
全か
on
ど
the
うか。
space,
ここはね、
the
ヒドラジン
SpaceX
とかを使
recovery
ってる
ship,
からね、
the hatches
ちゃん
will
とした
be opened.
チェックをしない
We
と
expect that to take place
やられ
probably in
ま
about
す。
10 to 15 minutes from now. And once open,
い
a
つもやってます
SpaceX
ね、これ。
medical doctor will be the first one to check
さっきまで
in
吹いてたもん
on
ね。
Anne McLean, Nicole Ayers, Takuya Onishi, and Kirill Peskov and see if they are ready for egress or getting out of the spacecraft. And while Dragon's top hatch is used to connect to the space station, the
この検知
astronauts
作業
will
が終わった
actually
らね、
egress or exit
マ
from
スク外
Dragon's
してくれる
side
んじゃないか
hatch,
なと思います。
pending capsule orientation in the water. Of course, we did see that it splashed down in orientation 1, so that the nose cone was facing up, which is the preferred orientation. And so before opening the hatch, the spacecraft's cabin pressure must be equalized with the outside environment. And then once the hatch is open, that will be the crew's first breath of fresh air since boarding their spacecraft at the start of their journey last March. Again, they lifted off from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida on March 14th of this year.
And it's important to note that Anne, Nicole, Takuya, and Kirill will be getting assistance from the recovery teams while exiting the spacecraft. This is the same process for any returning long-duration crew members, as returning to a gravity environment can wreak havoc with our vestibular system, responsible for maintaining balance and motion. Safety is our #1 priority with this operation, so you'll see the crew members helped out of the spacecraft one by one and assisted the few feet to the medical quarters aboard the boat.
And if you've ever watched crews return on a Soyuz, 2 of our crew members today had actually previously flown on a Soyuz, Anne McLean and Takuya Onishi. This is the same process as when astronauts are carried from the Soyuz capsule to waiting chairs on the steppe of Kazakhstan and then carried to a waiting medical tent.
ちょっと
This
ま
is
たい
also
な
the
くなる。
period
喉
where
の調
any
子
time
悪く
critical
ないから
cargo can be
休み休
recovered
みや
from
る
the
ね。
spacecraft, with the remainder waiting
休
until
み。
the ship is back in port.
Once the ship and spacecraft return to shore, the recovery team will perform additional inspections before loading Dragon onto a flatbed truck at the SpaceX facility in Cape Canaveral for post-processing.
And so we mentioned earlier all of the science and research that Crew 10 conducted during their 5-month mission aboard the International Space Station. So in addition to some of the physical and biological science experiments that they conduct, they too themselves are human research subjects. So a lot of teams work to gather samples from the crew throughout their mission to see how the microgravity environment of space actually impacts the human body. So NASA does have the Human Research Program, which is responsible for a lot of that science and investigation. But of course, there's also researchers outside of NASA that use the microgravity environment aboard the International Space Station to conduct their science and research. We do have the International Space Station National Laboratory that helps to facilitate a lot of that other research as well.
And those research experiments, especially with the human body, are extremely important, especially for, we call these long-duration missions 5 to 6 months long, but if we're going to be going to the moon, planets like Mars, we're going to need to stay a lot longer, and we're going to need to know how to keep the human body healthy throughout that time. What happens in these microgravity environments, and how can we better prepare the humans for going on these even longer duration missions?
So the International Space Station does serve as sort of a testing and proving ground for NASA's future Artemis missions to the moon and then on to Mars. Of course, we can't necessarily do all science and research in the microgravity environment due to various factors. So teams on the ground also do what are known as analog research experiments. Also, a lot of that is based out of our Human Research Program. So one of those, known as the Human Exploration Research Analog, or HERA, does some isolation and confinement research inside of an analog setup that's supposed to simulate a spacecraft. Another one of those analogs is known as CHIPIA, or the Crew Health and Exploration Research Analog, which actually simulates a stay on the surface of Mars for about a year. So while this International Space Station does do a lot of great research, some of that research can also be done on the ground in preparation for those long-duration exploration missions to the Moon and Mars.
And you can see on your screen, the Dragon spacecraft is now translating forward to that deck that we saw earlier. Again, that deck is the height just below the hatch, which will make it a lot easier for the crew to egress the spacecraft.
And so right before that translation took place, a couple of the recovery team members did do some final safety checks of the spacecraft to ensure that it was safe and ready to go for additional people to approach the spacecraft and to begin those hatch open preparations and operations to get Crew 10 out of the spacecraft and back on Earth. And for those of you who are just joining us, Crew 10 did safely splash down about 40 minutes ago off the coast of San Diego, California, aboard a SpaceX Dragon spacecraft known as Endurance. Endurance did fly on 3 previous missions, Crew 3, Crew 5, and Crew 9. So this was the 4th flight of the Dragon Endurance spacecraft. It launched to the International Space Station about 5 months ago on March 14th from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Following that launch, it had a journey to the International Space Station where it was then docked and remained for about 5 months for all of that science and research that Crew 10 conducted. And then yesterday at 3:15 p.m. Pacific, 6:15 p.m. Eastern, Dragon and the Crew 10 crew safely undocked from the International Space Station and made their way back to Earth. They had an about 17.5-hour journey from that undocking until their splashdown, which again took place at 8:33 a.m. Pacific, 11:33 a.m. Eastern today. And Crew 10 again is comprised of NASA astronauts Anne McClain and Nicole Ayers, along with JAXA, or Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency astronaut Takuya Onishi and Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov. And so we are now just standing by for So that hatch on the Dragon Endurance spacecraft is now open, and teams are working to get Crew 10 out and back on Earth. Again, they will be initially checked out by a SpaceX medical director. You did just see him go in there a moment ago to make sure that they are feeling okay and are ready to egress or exit the spacecraft.
We are also seeing the recovery crew
開きましたね。
that
いきなりだったね。
hatch seal protection.
ハッチも開きましたね。ぐぐっとね、
Helps protect
押し込ま
both
れ
the
て。
seal of the hatch on the spacecraft as well
もう
as
開いちゃい
the
た。これね、
crew
ハッ
as
チの
they're
周りの
exiting the
ね、
vehicle.
ここにね、枠を入れて、
And so that hatch was officially opened at 9:10 a.m.
ここ保護し
Pacific,
ます。
12:10
保護した見えた
p.m. Eastern Time.
枠をね、この辺を保護するんだよね。
a.m.
次ま
Pacific,
た使うからかな。
11:33 a.m. Eastern off the coast of San Diego, California. Again, they are doing some initial medical evaluations, and then they will be prepared to egress or exit the spacecraft and take their first breath of fresh air. Again, they will be
宇宙
assisted out
船
of
の
the
方に
spacecraft.
穴
That
開いたり
is
傷
completely
つけたり
normal.
すると、次また閉め
And
るとい
then
うか、
from there, they
ね、
will go just a
ここ
few
をさ、
steps
機密取るときに
into
穴開い
do
て
some
大変で
additional
しょ？
medical checkouts.
金属側がやられると、
And then after the
また機
egress
密で
is
きなくなっちゃうから。
finally complete and all 4 crew members are out of the spacecraft, they will take a helicopter back to dry land And then from there in California, they will then board a NASA plane and make their way back home to Houston, Texas.
この後ね、
You
出
can
てきた
see the
後は NASA
recovery
の飛
team
行機
again
に、違う、ヘリで
preparing
の
for that egress or exiting
地元にも
the
地元じゃないな。
spacecraft.
陸に戻っ
They
て、そこから NASA の飛行機で
using
飛ぶらし
some
い。
aids. There's
使い捨
going
てじゃない
to
の
be
か。
a
違
little
い
bit
ま
of
す
a
よ。
ramp
この宇
to
宙船。
enable the crew
使い捨てじゃ
to
ないんですよ。
easily exit the
もう
spacecraft
すでにこれ
instead
何
of
回
taking
か
that
使って
large
るやつで
step.
すよ。
They can use that ramp to exit.
4回目のフライトだったかな。エンデューラン中。
And recovering the crew
オーリンが取り替えだよね。それ替えてるかどうか
is a bit
は
of a joint operation.
ここには出て
So
な
we
いけ
do
ど、
have team
オーリン
members
グ側
from
というか、オー
NASA's
リン
flight
グをこう受け
operations
る側っていうの
directorate
か
out
な。
there, as well
そ
as
っち側
NASA's
の
commercial
金
crew
属の部分
program,
に人
and
が入るとよく
some
ないから
flight
ね。
surgeons from the NASA and international partners that
発
will
電しましたね。
be prepared to retrieve and receive the crew following their egress or exit from the spacecraft. So it'll be nice to see some familiar faces, friendly faces, as they've worked with all of these teams in preparation for their space flight, and they will be greeting them
何回使うん
upon
だ
their
ろう。何
return.
回使うんだったっけ。回数とかあったっけ。他のドラゴンでもっと使ってるやつあるのか。これで新しく出たグレースは1回でしょ。フリーダムが4回、エンデュランスも4回、レジリアンスも4回のはずだから、エンデバーが6回じゃないかな。エンデバーが6回最
See
初。
that the crew is removing some of their cargo that looked like their tablets that they were using to follow along with every procedure throughout the entire mission and ride on Dragon.
And after the crew is extracted or egressed out of the spacecraft, they will remove some additional cargo that's time critical.
そろそろ出て
Often
くるか
that is
な。
cargo that needs to be chilled
滑り台的なものを置かれるかなと思うんだけどな、
samples
こ
and
こに。
such that need to be in a specific environment, so that will be immediately offloaded after the crew exits the spacecraft, and then any additional cargo will be offloaded after it makes its way back to port off the coast of San Diego, California.
下のなんか椅子
Looks
のパー
like
ツ
those
かな。
are the
これを外
footrests
してい
being
ますね。
removed that allow the crew to get out of their seats a little bit easier.
Do you see one of those
なんで滑り台的なや
pads
つ
or
が
slides that they use to help
置かれる
extract
か
the
な。
crew? So we should see some of that egress taking place momentarily.
そろそろかな。滑り台来ましたね。もうちょいかな。
If you're just now joining us, you are watching the Crew 10 mission as we await the 4 crew members, NASA astronauts Anne McClain and Nicole
久しぶりの
Ayers, JAXA
重
astronaut
力はどう
Takuya
だ。
Nishi, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov egress the Dragon spacecraft here shortly. They just recently, in the last 10 minutes, were able to take the first breath of fresh air in about 5 months. So we're excited to see them stand with gravity for the first time in 5 months.
And so they will likely be assisted, so we might not see the first steps, but they will be assisted out of the capsule. And it is important to note, since they were under the microgravity environment, their muscles, their bones, all of their systems haven't been exposed to Earth's gravity in over 5 months, which of course has some impacts on the human body, which is some of the
何が出てるか
important
と思った。
research that
足
is
かそ
done
れ。
on the international
足が出てるんだ。
station to actually see how
一
the
人中に
human
入ったの
body
か
is
な。
affected by the environment of outer space. And so that hatch did open about 6 minutes ago at 9:10 a.m. Pacific, 12:10 p.m. Eastern, following a splashdown at 8:33 a.m. Pacific, 11:33 a.m. Eastern, off the coast of California. Following that splashdown, the recovery team went out to meet the Dragon Endurance spacecraft. First out were the two fast boats, which began some safety checks and also began to safe the spacecraft in preparation to be lifted onto the recovery vessel, the Shannon. And the Shannon did arrive to the splashdown
結構
location less than
酔っ
30
ちゃ
minutes
うから
after
ね。
splashdown
こんなすごい
to
揺れた
then
ら。
lift
ね、大丈夫
the
かな
spacecraft
心配。
up on board the Shannon, and now we're just awaiting the crew to exit or egress the spacecraft. It does look like they are preparing for that crew egress
お、来
here
るか
in just
な
a
まだ
moment.
かな半年ぐらいなのか。そうだね。半年滞在ですね。長期滞在は。お、来た来た来た来た来た生まれたグッと押した。
The
NASA
first
かな
Crew 10 crew member has now
Crew 10 の
successfully egressed or exited the capsule. And that is NASA astronaut Anne McClain.
マクリーンさんかな
She looks very excited to be back on Earth,
おかえ
given
り
a arm pump. And the other 3 crew members should be following behind here shortly.
ドラゴンから生まれたドラ太郎。どんぶらこどんぶらことドラゴンが、おじいさんは川へ芝刈りに、おばあさんは海へ、あれ洗濯に、川へ芝刈っちゃった。山へ芝刈りに、おばあさんは川へ洗濯に。すると、川上の方から、どんぶらこどんぶらこと、大きなドラゴンが、そのまま流れて海に行ってしもうたのじゃ。海はとてもしけていて、大変酔っちゃったのである。ばあさんはこれさわいと、荒ぶるドラゴンをお家に持って帰ろうとしたけど持ち上がらなかったから。
NASA astronaut Anne McClain make her way out of the Dragon Endurance spacecraft.
その
and now
辺
we're
にい
just
た
standing by
ダイ
for
バーに手
the
伝ってもらって、
egress or exit of
引っ
the
掛けて引っ
following
張っ
3
て、
crew 10 crew members to complete the
門
recovery
に
process.
かけて玉
So
か
we're
けを
standing
して
by for the egress
乗っ
of
け
NASA
て
astronaut Nicole Ayers, JAXA
見たの
astronaut
である。
Takuya Onishi, and Roscosmonaut Kirill Peskov.
まだ生まれないかな。中には4人で乗ってるはずで、1人生まれたので、あと3人いらっしゃいますかね。浜でいじめられていたドラ太郎を助けたおじいさんは。
And the
お、
second Crew 10 crew member has successfully egressed the
お疲
capsule,
れ
and
様。
that is NASA astronaut
NASA のアストロナット
Nicole
ゼ
Ayers.
さん。ニコエ
So
ア
both
スさんです
NASA
ね。
astronauts Anne McClain and Nicole Ayers
ニコル
have
さんかな
successfully
ニ
egressed
コ
or
エ
exited
ア
the
さん。
capsule. Anne McClain
アメ
served
リカ
as
の
the Crew 10
NASA 宇
commander,
宙飛
and
行士さ
Nicole
んで
Ayers
す。
served as the Crew 10 pilot for this mission.
あと
So the
2
final
人。
two crew members that we are awaiting are JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi and Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov.
お姉さんと、あと、ロシアの ケーペコフさんが残ってるかな。あと残りはロシアと日本。
You did just see them removing 2 additional foot restraints, likely preparing to egress the final 2 crew 10 crew members.
ドラサロ、ドラジロ、ドラサブロとドラシロ。ドラシロ？ドラゴローが一番語呂が良くないドラゴローがいいなぁ。リアも入って出たらドラゴローになれるかな。まだかな。
You're just now joining us. NASA astronauts Anne McClain and Nicole Ayers have already egressed or exited the Dragon Endurance spacecraft. And again, we are waiting for the final 2 Crew 10 members to exit. JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi and Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov are still inside of the Dragon
お兄
spacecraft.
さんとロシアの
So
宇
the
宙飛
crew
行士キエル
did
ペス
complete
コフ
a
さんがまだ
148-day mission,
残ってい
with
ますって言ってる。
146 of those days docked to the International Space Station. During that time, they completed more than 2,300 orbits around the Earth, traveling more than 62.7 million statute miles. And NASA astronaut Anne McClain, who was the first to exit the spacecraft, has now totaled 352 total days in space.
マクレーンは
This
今回
was
初め
her
て
second space
NASA の
flight.
宇宙
Her
飛
previous
行
mission
士
was aboard a
の
Soyuz
マクレーンさん
spacecraft.
が
And then
初め
this
て
was
船
the
外
first
制度
space
活動し
flight
た
for
よって
NASA
言ってる。
astronaut Nicole Ayers, who was the second to exit the spacecraft.
Oh.
So she now has
もう手
148
前まで
days
来て
in
ますね。
space.
ああ。おかえりなさい、お兄さん。
And we do now see JAXA astronaut
お
Takuya
兄さん
Onishi
だ。
has
おかえり
exited
な
the
さい。
spacecraft. And this was also the second space flight for Onishi. So across his 2 missions, he has now totaled 263 days
お
in
兄
space.
さんです。お兄
So
さん
we
た
are
くや
now
宇
just
宙飛
standing
行
by for
士。
the
お
final
かえり
crew
なさい。
member of Crew 10 to make their way out of the spacecraft, and that is Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov.
元気なお兄さんです。ドラサブロの称号を与えましょう。あともう一
To
人、
recap
ロ
a
スコ
little
スモス
bit,
の
the Crew 10
宇宙飛行
mission
士
launched
残って
aboard
ます。
a Falcon 9 rocket inside a Dragon spacecraft, which you're now seeing on your screen. That launch took place from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida on March 14th. The crew then had a journey to the space station and docked shortly thereafter, spending about 5 months attached to the orbiting laboratory, conducting science and research before undocking yesterday, August 8th at 3:15 p.m. Pacific, 6:15 p.m. Eastern, for a 17.5-hour return journey back to Earth, splashing down off the coast of San Diego, California earlier this morning at 8:33 a.m. Pacific, 11:33 a.m. Eastern, which was less than an hour ago. And they are working to egress the final crew member. The initial 3 crew members have already safely exited the spacecraft, and those are NASA astronauts Anne McClain and Nicole Ayers, along with JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi. So the egress of Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov is now underway, and you can see him making his way out of the spacecraft right now.
来た来た来た来た来た来た。
And there you have Roscosmos
お疲
cosmonaut
れ様
Kirill
です。
Peskov waving as he takes his final or initial steps on Earth.
最後の
And
4
he
人
will
目。
now be taken back
地球にお帰りな
to
さい。
some additional medical checks.
この後ね、メディカルチェックを受けて、
all 4 crew 10 crew members
医療
are
検査を
safely
受け
back
て、
on Earth. They
そ
have
の
all
後
egress.
帰っていきま
And
す。
so now
無事
that
4人の宇宙
NASA
飛行士が
astronauts Anne McClain
降り
and
ましたね。
Nicole Ayers
お
along
疲
with
れ様です。
astronaut Takuya Onishi and Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov are safely back home on planet Earth and getting checked out by the NASA medical team, we are going to go ahead and wrap up our live coverage of their return. After a successful
はい、
liftoff
という
and
ことで、
separation
今
from
回ね、4人の
Falcon
宇宙飛行
9
士さん
back
出て
on
くると
March
ころまで見ることが
14th,
で
crew
きま
10
した。
made their way on
よか
board
った。
Dragon to the International Space
お
Station
兄
and
さんやっと帰
completed
って
a
きた。
148-day mission in space. NASA astronauts Anne McClain and Nicole Ayers conducted one spacewalk during their 5 months in space on May 1st, relocating a space station communications antenna and the
お、リ
initial
ロケート
mounting
出てん
bracket
な。
installation steps for an IROSA, or International Space Station Rollout Solar Array, that will arrive on a future SpaceX commercial resupply services
それ
mission.
ロールアウトソーラーアレ
With
イ
their
今度持
full
っていくみたいだ
duration
よ。
mission coming to an end, the crew began packing up their personal items for their return to Earth about a week ago and worked through tasks and shared lessons learned with Crew 11 teams as they arrived to the space station a few days ago.
Their journey home began when they closed the hatch to Dragon and undocked from the space station at 3:15 p.m. Pacific or 6:15 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday, August 8th. After 4 successful departure burns and a phasing burn to line up their orbit, Anne, Nicole, Takuya, and Kirill rested for a few hours before waking up to prepare for re-entry this morning.
いやー、
Dragon
よかった
performed
よ
an
かった。
approximately
今日めちゃくちゃ見どころあり
17.5-minute
ました
long deorbit
ね。
burn to send Dragon on a path
あんな
home.
にし
That
けて
burn
たのに
ended
大変だった
at
ね。
7:57 a.m. Pacific Time, 10:57 a.m. Eastern, and this was followed by trunk separation and Dragon's final on-orbit maneuver, closing of the nose cone at 8:02 a.m. Pacific Time, 11:02 a.m. Eastern. The spacecraft re-entered the Earth's atmosphere and slowed its descent with successful deployments of 2 drogue parachutes and 4 mains, with the final splashdown occurring off the coast of San Diego, California at 8:33 a.m. Pacific Time or 11:33 a.m. Eastern. Following that successful splashdown, we saw SpaceX recovery
今、
experts
何
move
があり
in
ま
and
したかっ
prepare
ていうのを言って
Dragon
みたいです
Endurance
ね。
for its lift
こ
on
れ
the
は
recovery
あると
vessel.
思うんだ
And
けど
just a
な。
little less than an hour following splashdown, we saw Anne, Nicole, Takuya, and Kirill make their way out of Dragon and into the recovery ship's medical facilities safe and sound.
And next up, they'll catch a helicopter flight back to shore while they're transferred to aircraft that will take them home. The astronauts will take a NASA plane for the short flight back to Houston. They'll then be reunited with their families to bring an end to this mission. It's been an honor and privilege to share their journey with all of you as we continue this new era in human spaceflight.
And return today marks the end of the direct handover we executed after successfully launching the Crew 11 mission to the space station
あ、
just
クルー
last
レ
week
ブンの
on
打ち上げ
Friday,
のロケ行っ
August
た話もしてますね。
1st. Thank you as always for joining us for this morning's coverage of the
見てくれてあ
splashdown
り
of
がとう
Crew
ござい
10.
ましたって言って
Remember to
る。
follow SpaceX on X and NASA online
SpaceX
and on
NASA
social
の
media for updates
X
for
フォ
the
ローして
very
ね。
latest
アッ
on
プデート
crew
ゲッ
and
トして
cargo
ね。っ
flights
て言って
to
ま
and
すね。
from the International Space Station.
And we'll continue to share the progress of Anne McClain, Nicole Ayers, Takuya Onishi, and Kirill
こ
Peskov
の
on
後は
social
ね、
media
8
as
月
they travel
21
back
日に
home.
ク
We
ル
will also
ー、
have
違う
a
違う、カーゴ、ドラ
post-splashdown
ゴンの
media
打ち上がりますから
teleconference coming up
皆さ
at
ん楽しみにしてて
approximately
くだ
10
さい。
a.m.
8
Pacific,
月21
1
日ね。
p.m. Eastern, where leadership will share a final update as we conclude this successful mission. And you can tune in live on NASA's YouTube page and through nasa.gov. From all of us at NASA and SpaceX, thank you for joining us and welcome home, Crew 10.
Thank you! おし。ということで皆さんお疲れ様でした。大西宇宙飛行士無事に帰ってきました。見られた。3人目でしたね、降りてきたの。どれかな？これかな？あ、違う、この後だ。
And the
こ
other
のタイミングかなと思ったけど。
so we're
ほっほっほっ。
Of all members to
was the first crew
ほっほっほっほっほ。
the
ここかな？リプレイしてます。すると、
And there you have Roscosmos
あれ
cosmonaut Kirill Peskov.
一人飛ばした。ロスコスモスさんになった。
He takes his final.
一人飛ばしちゃった。
And then this was the first
これ
space
だ、
flight
こ
for
のタイ
NASA
ミングで
astronaut
す。
Nicole Ayers, who was the
皆さん、
second to exit the spacecraft. So she now has 148
こっ
days
ち
in
だ。
space.
すると、上手。ISS の船長も務めましたからね、本日さん。素晴らしいです。
And
手も振って
And we
る。
do now see
元気そう。
JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi has exited the spacecraft. And this was also the second space flight for
お
Onishi.
疲れ様。
So
手も振
across
ってま
his
した
two
ね。
missions, he has now totaled 263 days in space.
一応、ちょっとどっかリアも。よいしょ。ここに、手を撫でられる感じに。お疲れ様でした。はい、チーズ。おしゃ。ありがとうございました。よし。はい。ということでですね、無事皆さん見守ってくださりありがとうございました。こんな感じでね、皆さんが乗っているこのクルードラゴンの中の映像から何からいろいろ公開されていたので、この巻き戻してみるけど、おー、野菜じゃないか。食べ物がある。いい写真ですね。はい。スプラッシュダウンするところちょっとね、今回は、ダウンする瞬間は見られなかったんですけど、天気が悪くてね、リエントリーも途中からでね、終わっちゃったので、見どころとしては見栄えは、前よりはあったかわかんないですけど、たまに映るものは結構いつもより珍しかったかなと思います。天気が悪かったりとかね、赤外線カメラじゃない映像で見るとすごい、めちゃくちゃ、
main parachutes that have now deployed and about 900 meters away
なってたりとかね。
from the water surface.
角もズボしたりとかね。結構、あまり見ないことがいっぱい起こってましたね。
Crew monitoring their altitude as they make their way to splashdown. And I love these daytime views that we get. We don't always get to pick the time when the crew splashes down, but it's awesome when we have a great morning and a clear view watching as the Dragon Endurance spacecraft carrying crew
ここから見えなくなっちゃったんだよね。
I copy 600 meters.
Crew just 600 meters away from splashdown.
And just over a minute away from that
こん
target
な
of
感じで
splashdown time, again expected around
雲ズボする様子もよく見えましたけど、
11:33 a.m. Eastern.
よかったね、見えて
Now
ね。
about 500 meters away from
ちょうど1時間ぐらいでやっぱり中の宇宙飛
and
行士さんた
slowed
ちを出すみたい
down
で
to
す。
about 35 kilometers per hour. Again, it'll continue to slow down.
SpaceX Dragon, 400 meters. SpaceX Dragon, 400 meters. Splashdown. Brace for splashdown.
SpaceX copies 400 meters and crew are braced for
はい。
splashdown.
こうやって雲に消えていきましたね。もうによっ
We
と。
just saw an incredible view there of the Dragon as it re-entered under some cloud
な
cover
かなか珍しいのがこの後、ドローンシュートだけを映すっていう。
until about 16 kilometers per hour.
何かしら映ってるもの
And
だけで
there
も
we
って思っ
can
て
see
来て
another
くれたん
live
だろう
look
ね。
of the Dragon Endurance spacecraft carrying Crew 10 back home to Earth following their 5-month mission, moments away from splashdown.
これドローンシュートといってちっちゃいパラシュートですね。抵抗を少しだけこうかけてあげるというか、一気に抵抗を抵抗になるパラシュートを開くと、グーンって急減速して危ないからね。ゆっくり落としていくためにちっちゃいやつを作ってます。あと、大きなパラシュートの方の引き出しっていうのかな。それも
SpaceX copies splashdown.
やってる。
And we did just hear that confirmation of splashdown. The view that you're seeing on your screen is a little bit delayed.
で、こうやって間にシュロスダウンしましたよと言われて、なんて待ってってなったのが、ね、さっきですね。で、この後、もうちゃんとついてるやんけって感じになったんだけど、結構海の様子がやっぱりしけてて、こんな感じの天候だったっていうのを見て、うわ、すごい、ちょっとこれは大変そうだなと思いましたね。この後、こうやってかけて、
upwind of the spacecraft. The two fast boats have very
遠く
specific
から持ってきます。こんな風にだんだん近づいて、
the fast boats, and those fast boats were some of the initial recovery boats.
I think that's one of the best
of the spacecraft onto the recovery vessel. They are there so that they can physically attach.
ゼロダバーン。すごい、カウントダウン完璧だったんだけど。
Copy. Cruise brace.
で、ささっと泳いで、船に乗り上がりましたね。
So they have physically attached those hoist rings and connected the lifting lines, and now they are preparing to lift
そ
the
してこうやってホイストかな、
location.
吊り上げていきます。
So and then about 10 minutes or so from then, it'll be ready for hatch open. And
貴重な裏側が見られるところ。このタイミングしか裏側見られないんじゃないかな。いつもこの下にトランクついてるし。着水したらここもう水の中だし、着船した時のこの裏のタイミング、裏側が見れるタイミングが今しかないかも。はい。で、こんな感じですね。
and until spacecraft.
So that lift of the Dragon Endurance
はい。
spacecraft
で、
is
この
now
後、移動させまして、その前にガス検かな、ガスチェックを行って、
this international space
Green.
こうや
And
って
that deck is
ウィ
the
ーンと
spacecraft
移動してい
is
き
now
ます。
translating forward to that deck that we saw earlier. Again, that deck is the height just below the hatch, which will make it a lot easier for the crew to egress the spacecraft.
And so right before that
はい。この
translation
辺の人
took
たちみんなね、
place,
ガスマスクつけてます
a
が、
couple of the
やっぱり
recovery
危
team
ない
members did do some final
エン
safety
ジンの
checks
燃
of
料
the
があるので、
spacecraft to ensure that it was
絶
safe
対
and
に影響
ready
があるや
to
つと
go
か
for
特に気に
additional
しています
people
ね。
to approach the
特に
spacecraft
画
and
面
to
じゃない
begin
や。
those hatch open
特に
preparations and
そうだ、
operations
特に
to
この
get
表面に宇宙人が
crewsmen
くっつい
out
て
of
た
the
かどうかを気に
spacecraft
してるわけ
and
ではあ
back
りま
on
せん。
Earth.
横についてるこのスラスタたちからね、変なガスが出てないかっていうのを見てる。はい。で、これも OK になったらみんな
known as endurance crew to Kuya
ガスマ
Onishi
スクを外して
and 10 crew
きますね。
until they're fully undocked from the International Space Station and made their way back to Earth. They had an about 17.5-hour journey from that undocking until their splashdown, which again took place
はい。そして先ほどみたいな感じで
Before that egress
4
or
人全員
exiting
降りてき
the
ましたよと。
spacecraft, they are. Looks like those are the footrests being
は
removed.
い。で、フットレスト取ったりとかして、よいしょ。最後、他に出てくるとこ見れないかな。
and that is NASA astronaut Anne McClain. She looks very excited to be back on Earth, given a arm pump. Endurance. Anne McClain and Nicole Ayers have successfully egressed. Crew
Astronauts of the Dragons.
more than and NASA astronaut Nicole Ayers, who was the second to exit the spacecraft. So she now has 148 days in space.
はい、こんな感じでね、無事、
And
出
we
てくる
do
ことができ
now
ました。と
see
いう
JAXA
ことで、総
astronaut
集編を
Vtuber
手動でお送りしてみましたが、いか
has
がだったで
exited
しょう
the
か。
spacecraft. And
途中
this
たまに
was
来てって
also
ごめん
the
ね。
second space flight for Onishi. So across his two missions,
パラシュート
he
も回
has
収してん
now
のかな。
totaled
あ、してるかもしんないね。
263 days in space.
よし、じゃあ皆さんも
So
し
we
よか
are
ったら
now
グッド
just
ボタンも
standing
押して
by
く
for
ださい
the
ね。
final crew member of Crew 10 to make
行
their
って
way
たい
out
ま
of
ーす。はい。改めて、ありがとうございました。ロケットアイドルの薄いクリアです。今日はたくさんクルー10のこと見ることができました。ずっと大西さんが楽しい話をね、X に書いてくるのがすごく楽しみにしてたので、今後は地上からももっともっと楽しみにしていこうと思います。そして、バトンタッチで宇宙に行ったゆいさん、これからもあと半年間頑張ってください。期間中には、リアの声の乗っている RLSP03 と、それから、みんながとても楽しみにしている HTVX という新しい補給船のキャプチャーがありますので、お楽しみにしています。よし。あとさ、お兄さんゆいさんと撮った動画とか、ゆいさんに野菜が食べさせられたかどうかとか、後で報告してくださいね。よろしくお願いします。はい。ということで、もう時間も遅いので、今日は終了にしたいと思います。では今日は有明と秋葉原と両方行ったので大変でした。楽しかったです。エレキ万博もね、ありがとうございました。またいろいろあったら雑談うまく撮ったりとかして話していきたいと思います。今日は終了。おやすみなさい。また明日会いましょう。じゃあね。バイバイ。おやすみ。お疲れ様ありがとうございました。眠はぁ。シャーピー。みんな大好きシャーピー。バイバイ。